Do you want to start with the strongest possible day 1 account in WutheringWaves? Well, here's how you'll do it. First and foremost, you'll listen to me thank these amazing creators who let me use their footage and have also helped me research some of the topics I'm talking about, but let's actually get into it. Halt! Have you not joined the Discord yet already? We're giving away 20 battle passes to you lucky viewers if you guys decide to join the Discord and click on this little button so you can be entered into the raffle as a way to give back to the community. Thank you again for everyone that was supporting me, especially during the subathon and through all the different content I've been doing recently. Let's get back to the video. Now let's talk about this web event. A lot of you guys are probably familiar with this and you may have passed over it, you may not think it's worth it, but let me break it down. Now the reason why you clear the web event and one of the major pros of doing this is that you get a free echo. And alongside the echo, you get things like astrites and some in-game currency. But let's stop for a second. What exactly is an echo, you may be asking? An echo is a summon that not only aids you in battle as a special summon and also gives you special effects or can be used as an attack, but it also acts as the stat affecting system in WutheringWaves. But let's hop back to the web event before we get a little bit too far now. To be clear, if you want to clear the web event, what you need to do is complete these missions, which not only give you a couple of pulls, which of course allows you to potentially get a good echo that you could then take with you later, it also contributes to this bar down here on the bottom, which once completed gives you the goods that I mentioned before, including astrite, in-game currency, all things that you really want when you start the game. Now on that note, you may be wondering or asking yourself, what echo do I want? Is there a good one? Is there a best in slot? And based on everything that we know and understand about the ecosystems, though you can min-max and take something that is a bit more ideal, depending on if it's a DPS or a supportive echo, one thing remains true no matter what you read or what you have, and it's that RNG is RNG. Therefore, so long as you have a legendary and a 3-cost echo, not only do you give yourself a decent chance of getting an okay echo, you also manage to give yourself the most amount of EXP, which I'll get into later regarding your databank. Now again, to be clear, the substats on these echoes are completely random, so although I do understand some of the min-maxing of who you want to take, ultimately, there's a good chance that it'll be bad and you'll just replace it in a couple days anyways. There are still 2 things that I want to make mention of when it comes to finishing and completing the web event, and the first is that when you've decided on which echo, preferably like I mentioned before, that is a 3-cost and a legendary, you want to make sure that you lock it in. If you don't lock it in, all of this has basically been for naught, and you don't get an echo, which may not be the biggest deal in the world, but you might as well have as many things as possible if you want to be the strongest. And the second is that although it does say that you are going to get a 5-star echo and claim astrites, you actually don't get the echo specifically until you hit union level 8 on your account. More details on what a union level is, but just keep that in the back of your mind as we continue to the next section. Now I touched on rerolling in the last video that I did regarding WutheringWaves, but let's go a little bit in depth. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And why? Now, beyond what I mentioned about the 35 to 45, maybe even an hour length of time that it takes to actually clear this content, the answer is that there are a lot of things that are stacked against you if you're trying to reroll. Prydwen does it best, and again, thank you to Prydwen for this. But if you take a look, there are things like WutheringWaves doesn't have a guest login option. The rates in the game are pretty low if you're specifically trying to get a 5-star. And beyond anything else, and kind of the biggest thing that people are assuming, and I don't think we have it quite confirmed, but it's likely the fact you're going to be able to choose a 5-star to pity after the fact, and the fact that you get so many of these 4-stars for free as well. To be clear, although I understand I'm advising against rerolling in a sense just because of how kind of time wasting it feels, you are totally completely fine to do as you please. If you want to reroll because you want to get the biggest min-max instead of just kind of rolling through the game kind of earlier and taking what you get, by all means, don't let me or anyone else in the world tell you how to play the game. It's your experience. You are the main character in WutheringWaves. Go nuts. Hi everybody, Future Connor here to let you know that according to the live stream that just got announced, we are going to be getting an easier beginner banner if you choose to reroll. So that may affect things if you are planning on rerolling, thinking about rerolling, because now it's a little bit easier to get a guaranteed 5-star, assuming that you can afford to get pulls and then do your initial pulls after 40 pulls. And then get the initial character that you want after 40 pulls. Formerly, you couldn't necessarily guarantee anything within the first couple of rotations and you'd have to kind of just rely on your luck to get a character. But now with the new announcement that it is easier to get a character, more so now than ever, it may be worth it for you to do rerolling. If not though, no problem. I just wanted to update this information. On with the video. Now let's talk about pulls. I Am Ravenous has a very long, detailed, and rightfully so, in-depth guide of how many pulls you get and where you can get sources of asteroid or lustricized pulls, etc. from the game. But to summarize, you do get around 200 plus pulls over 30 days outside of things like login events that they may add, additional gachas or surprise mail that they send you. And some of the sources of these 200 pulls will be getting them from things like the pre-registration, doing things like the achievements, the login event that also gives you pulls. There are plenty of sources to get pulls from, and in terms of priorities and getting the strongest account possible, outside of your re-rolling of the first account, the way that you're going to start off strong is finding the different ways for you to get asteroid or pulls, especially if you're trying to start with the strongest character or with your ideal strongest start when you're remaining a specific character. But let's say you're already in the game, you know what you're looking for in terms of sources for asteroid or pulls, and you've already re-rolled the account that you like. What do you start doing then? And that's where we begin our grind around echoes and the databank. To touch on echoes and databanks, as I mentioned earlier, echoes not only give you strength and power to your characters, which makes sense because you want them to be stronger and therefore be able to beat up mobs or clear bosses, but the way that you actually gain access to echoes and the way that you get better echoes is through the databank. You guys may or may not know about the databank, and if you aren't familiar with it, it's basically the secondary level that you are trying to focus on when it comes to the start of WutheringWaves. The databank does a couple things for you. The first is affect things like the echo drop rate, but there also are rewards that come associated with it. On screen, you can see things like the asteroid and the in-game currency that are rewarded, and there are plenty of other things that are on this list that are very, very important when it comes to progression in the game and also trying to get pulls. Some key things to note about the databank as well is that although getting to max level for the databank will be important, you don't necessarily need every echo to be maxed or even to capture every single echo in order to hit max level. And on that note, it will actually take quite a while for you to hit max rank to get the highest drop rate for echoes, but all of this depends on your spending and investment in the game, because to be absolutely clear, your progression and your ability to get a high level databank will depend on things like your friends, whether or not you max out and buy the battle pass, how many people you decide to farm with. The list goes on and on. There's no real way to tell exactly how long it'll take for you to farm it. Some more calculations will come out on that later though. Long story short though, both of these go hand in hand, because in order to get a high level echo or an echo that has good substats, you need to have a higher level databank. And in order to get a higher level databank, you need to capture echoes. Now let's talk about the account rank, aka union level, and why sometimes people can get baited or kind of thrown off by it. Now to begin, there are plenty of ways that you get union level EXP, and that includes things like just doing the main story, and some quests will give you union level EXP, but things like using your Waveplates will also contribute towards your overall union level. Now what happens when you do increase your union level, and the things that are actually affected by your union level are things like increasing the level of tacit fields, claiming rewards like the Awakening Journey as you see behind me, and also increasing the overworld enemies levels, which makes them a little bit harder to kill. That being said, while you will be doing a lot of these things like clearing the story or using your stamina, that doesn't mean that getting a higher union level should be the main focus. Now while I did mention earlier that increasing your union level also improves tacit fields, you don't actually get that good value out of tacit fields earlier, and it isn't until later that you can actually justify doing them, so just keep that in mind. It's not a huge priority. But on that note, let's talk about stamina, aka Waveplates, and why it's important. Now this is going to be another really big thing to prioritize and manage when you're starting off WutheringWaves, but let's break it down real quick. You have a max capacity of 240 when it comes to stamina in this game, and you regenerate it once every 6 minutes. Have said this before, no biggie. You also have a max of 6 refreshes via Ash every day should you choose to refresh or spend a little bit more or see the need to spend more energy. But let me introduce you to something that a lot of you Hoyoverse players may or may not be familiar with, and yeah, that's the fragile resin, aka the crystal solvent in this game. This is a very important resource and item that you should be managing, because this is on-demand 60 free energy that you could use for whatever you like as soon as you consume it. But then you may be asking yourself, what do you actually use this energy on? And that's going to be on echo tuners. You may also be asking yourself the question, what is an echo tuner? Well, I'm glad you asked. An Echo Tuner is what actually unlocks the potential of your artifacts, aka gear and WutheringWaves, and it is extremely, extremely important. Whereas in other gacha games or MMORPGs, you may be familiar with the idea of upgrading a piece of gear, and after getting it to +3, +6, +9, etc., you gain a new substat or a new line of stats. In Wuthering Waves, you actually need a material in order to unlock that role and therefore unlock more potential. Now this system is definitely something that we'll have to monitor and track in the future to see how annoying or how egregious getting echo tuners are, but as it stands right now, it is a priority early game, and if you are able to, farming this will be extremely important if you want any additional stats on your gear. But on that note, let's talk about echoes and the idea of getting more and trying to get more stats in the game. Because as Rivnus is showing on screen right here, there was actually a developer's message that talked about the ability to use unupgraded and untouched echoes to roll for or fish for a new echo of a higher rarity and potentially have better stats. Now this is both a blessing and a curse. Number one, because you do actually have a use for your old or unused echoes that you haven't decided to throw out or upgrade. But number two, you get to save yourself some resources from checking some useless gear because you could potentially use it to roll something in the future. Now the bad side of this, of course, is the fact that if you ever decide to upgrade these pieces, or if you ever want to check or roll some gear to see if there's any crit value or any value like that, you won't be able to use it for any future echo upgrading, which is kind of toxic if I'm being honest. Being able to use old upgraded gear to then upgrade newer pieces of gear is a fairly standard thing that you can do in other gacha games at this point, but I will say that in terms of rerolling and being able to use old pieces of gear to reroll for a new, potentially shinier piece of gear, now that's a feature that I haven't seen in games at launch in most cases, and sometimes even later on after a year. At the end of it all though, we aren't exactly sure how this will work. They may change this on launch, but it's at least nice to know that they're walking in the right direction. Okay, but enough about echo tuners. What else can you use your stamina on? Well, right now, if you want to be able to awaken your characters or get resources to make your character stronger, look no further than world bosses. World bosses drop a lot of things that you will eventually need in order to upgrade your characters, and the alternative is things like simulation training, which is definitely not something that you need to prioritize over something like upgrading your characters. To be clear, you will have a lot of resources at the start of the game, and you likely will be able to upgrade an entire team even without doing things like simulation training. So try to make sure that you do things like the world bosses, you do things like farming out echo tuners so that you can upgrade your gear, and all of this will yield you a more versatile and stronger opening when you start Wuthering Waves. And now as we round out the end of the things that you will likely be focusing on day one, let's talk about if it's even possible for you to hit the end game. What does the end game look like? Are these things that you should be focusing on? And the answer to all these is that while endgame is nice, there is no way that you're going to be able to hit this day one, especially if you are looking through the perspective of someone that is free to play or low spend. Now, unlocking things like the weeklies and all the content in the game is nice because you have things like Tower of Adversity, which is the Abyss. You also have the Depth of Elusive Realm, which is the roguelike in the game, and you even have Tactical Hologram. Now, while it may be nice at first to unlock things like the endgame and see what potential loot you can get from them, something that you need to make note of is that some of the weeklies are actually better done after you've gotten stronger. And since you have the entire week to finish the content and you are basically just waiting as soon as the game starts, and since you are trying to scale your rewards up and be able to perform as well as possible in these pieces of content, in some cases it's not even worth it for you to min-max and rush to get to endgame as soon as possible, as opposed to clearing out all content and receiving as big of a payoff from your weeklies as possible. You've seen it in other games where in certain cases you want to be a certain union level or hit a certain level or progress in your account so you can get max rewards, and Wuthering Waves is no different. So therefore, although the endgame looks really cool, I do like the idea of a roguelike that lets you mess around and become stronger. Don't try and rush to the endgame specifically just so that you can get as much reward as soon as possible, especially if you're looking at it from a I want to min-max as soon as possible point of view, as opposed to, well, I need to complete this weekly because I won't be able to do it later kind of point of view. But that's all that I have for you guys on the day one priority guide when it comes to Wuthering Waves. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like, comment, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. If you guys enjoyed this content as well, make sure to check out the rest of my socials, my alt account, and make sure to join the Discord for the 20 Battle Pass giveaway that I'm doing. Thank you again, everyone, for supporting my content. I hope you guys are excited as I am for Wuthering Waves. I'll see you on the next one, though. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night. Adios.